By the time you finish this video, you'll know everything you need to know about every team in the World Cup. Well, actually, that's this entire video series, but today we're talking about Costa Rica, the final team in Group E. And if you want to watch that amazing Costa Rica defense hold Germany and Spain to frustrating 0-0 draws, I'll be doing watch-alongs to every World Cup match on my Twitch channel, and I really hope you'll be able to join me. The link is in the description. It's a perilous group with Germany, Spain, and Japan, all of whom made the knockouts at the World Cup last year. So what chance does Costa Rica actually have to get out of this group or give some of those teams a hard time? Well, the story begins in their qualifying campaign, which was insane. Actually, I'm not abusing that word. See, Costa Rica qualifies out of CONCACAF. This is North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. That's one qualifying section. And in the first round of matches, Costa Rica was as bad as you could possibly be, because you have to finish in the top 3 of these teams to get to the World Cup automatically. If you finish 4th, you go to the playoff, but you have to be in the top half, and 6 points from 7 is very far from that. But while Costa Rica only had 6 points after the first round of matches, they had 25 points after the second round of matches. Costa Rica won 6 of its final 7 matches after having won 1 of its first 7. And the way they did it was a remarkable defensive resurgence. Costa Rica only gave up 8 goals throughout the entire qualifying campaign. And in their last 6 matches, they gave up 1. And that included matches against World Cup teams, the United States, Mexico, and Canada. The only goal they gave up was to none of those teams either. It was to El Salvador. And despite this miraculous turnaround in their back half of qualifying, Costa Rica still finished behind the United States in goal difference in a clear top 4 in CONCACAF qualifying. Because they finished in 4th, they had to go to something called the Intercontinental Playoff, where you play another team in a similar situation from a different continent. That team would be New Zealand, and Costa Rica won the game 1-0, a third-minute goal from Joel Campbell. And unsurprisingly, Costa Rica did not allow a goal. That is what they do. And it is what they've done, at least when they've succeeded at the World Cup. This will be Costa Rica's 6th World Cup qualification, but it will be their 5th in the new millennium. Since 2002, Costa Rica's only missed the World Cup 1 time. They missed it in 2010, but promptly came back in 2014 and had a miraculous run to the quarterfinals that is mainly what Costa Rica is remembered for today. Costa Rica finished on top of a group with Uruguay, Italy, and England. They eliminated both Italy and England from this World Cup by beating Uruguay, beating Italy, and drawing England. It was a stupendous group 8 years ago, and one that looks eerily similar to the one they have in 2022. Who said that? After that, Costa Rica wasn't done. They got to play Greece in the round of 16 and beat them in penalties. Perhaps even more impressively, they got to the quarterfinals against the Netherlands, and they only lost to them in penalties. The last World Cup for Costa Rica is less memorable and more relevant. So Costa Rica ended up in another difficult group, Brazil, Switzerland, and Serbia, and only managed to draw with Switzerland in the final match. But when you look closer, Costa Rica maintained its ability to make some of the world's best teams incredibly uncomfortable. Brazil had to wait until the 91st minute to score the go-ahead goal against Costa Rica's vaunted defense. It was Philippe Coutinho, and then Neymar scored in the 97th, way into added time in order to make it look like it was an easy Brazilian victory, but it wasn't. Brazil was also level with Serbia until the second half and came back to tie Switzerland on 2 separate occasions. They are tough, resilient, and they certainly know how to defend. And that defense is a freaking hallmark, because when Costa Rica made the quarterfinals, you might have noticed they only conceded 2 goals in 5 matches against some of the world's best teams. It's honestly more relevant than you'd think, because a lot of the same guys are still on the team, but how have they fared in their continental competitions, which are much closer to the present day? And the answer is actually not that well. The last Gold Cup, which is the championship of CONCACAF, that little region we talked about earlier, was held in 2021. Now, Costa Rica won its group ahead of Jamaica, but once it got into the knockout stages, it was bounced again. It lost to Canada in the quarterfinal, and this is a very regular occurrence for Costa Rica, because even in the height of their golden generation at the World Cup quarterfinals, they have not been able to make a serious run at the Gold Cup. The last time they won the championship of this region was 1989. The last time they even made the final was 2002, and this thing happens every 2 years. And that's what makes their efforts in World Cup qualifying, particularly the second half of it, even more impressive, because this Gold Cup happened right before that terrible run of form that you might remember from their first half of World Cup qualifying. But then they figured it out, and that is the team you will see at the World Cup. Their continental competition and form was bad all around. In the Nations League, they only won 1 of the 5 matches that they played. They drew the other 4, including a penalty loss in the Nations League semifinal to Mexico because somehow they got out of their group anyways. It's like freaking group jujitsu. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Costa Rica just managed not to lose. But par for the course. They managed not to get scored on in the semifinal. So who is there to look out for on this team? Well, my player that I've picked is Joel Campbell, and I picked him for a very specific reason. He is the best forward on this team. He plays in the top Mexican league now, but he has moonlighted in Europe all over the place, and he does have 23 appearances for Arsenal, even though that seems like a distant memory. He's only 30 years old. He's top 10 in his country in all-time caps and all-time goals, and he's the most likely, considering Brian Ruiz and Borges, the 2 excellent midfielders that Costa Rica have, are really getting on in years. He's the most likely to provide the offensive spark. He's the only one still in his prime. He was on the World Cup teams in 2014 and 2018. He scored the goal against Uruguay that got Costa Rica started, but Costa Rica is bringing a stupendous defense to this competition. Joel Campbell just has to give them 1 or 2 goals. He has 118 caps. He's got all the experience on the world's biggest stage you could ask for. Joel Campbell is the guy that has to do it if Costa Rica will have a chance, because they will stop people. And the way they will do it is with a 4-4. Sorry, that didn't sound right. A 4-4 lads. Subscribe. Sorry. Just wanted to make sure that if you're enjoying the video, you click the button. This is the way it looked in the World Cup playoff against New Zealand. Obviously the most important match Costa Rica's played in the last 4 years, really. And Joel Campbell featured up top with Anthony Contreras. In the middle, we held Celso Borges, Brian Ruiz off the bench, but Borges and Ruiz, they're old, 2 of the top cap players in Costa Rican history, so they exchange for each other. Yeltsin Tejeda from the Costa Rican League plays next to him. But the key here is that back 5, right? Duarte and Calvo. They don't play in the top leagues, but they don't play in the Costa Rican League either. Duarte plays at Al Wahda in Saudi Arabia. Calvo plays at Konyaspor in Turkey. So they have high money, big stage experience, just not the biggest stage. That they exclusively get with the Costa Rican national team, where they both have over 70 caps. And so does their left back, Brian Oviedo, who plays for Real Salt Lake in the MLS, which is a league that has had its level rise significantly. But perhaps most importantly, behind those unsung heroes that have helped keep the ball out of the net for Costa Rica is Keylor Navas, one of the best goalkeepers in the world. He still plays for Paris Saint-Germain, and this is almost undoubtedly his last World Cup. This is his swan song, inarguably the greatest player in the history of Costa Rica. And that defense and that ability to be carried by that defense is the reason I think Costa Rica is in for a very fun group. How are they going to do in this tournament? It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. It always is with Costa Rica, and it is hard to overstate how impressive it is to concede 1 goal in your final 6 World Cup qualifying matches. But if they can get an own goal, if they can get a set piece goal or 2, or Joel Campbell is able to find his last great effort in a Costa Rican uniform, this Costa Rica team could shock Germany or Spain, and I thoroughly expect them to leave this tournament with a point. But that's it. I think Costa Rica is going to finish 4th and has no real prospects because of their lack of top-end technical ability to go all the way in this tournament. But I would not be shocked if they did find a way to get out of this group with a well-placed draw and a win over Japan, which is their best opportunity for a win. This is a tremendously interesting group, and you can read about, what are you reading YouTube videos now? You can hear about every other team in this group by watching this whole video series. We are previewing every team going to the World Cup, and this was obviously the last one in Group E. So everybody else, Japan, Germany, Spain, Group D, C, B, A, Y. Oh, that hurt. All right there. Check it out.